Inside the Mind of Jeffrey Dahmer, America's most disturbing serial killer. Episode 1. A normal boy with monstrous secrets. I carried it too far, that's for sure. Jeffrey Dahmer, in a 1991 police interview. Before he became one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, Jeffrey Dahmer was just a boy in a small town in Ohio. He liked collecting roadkill. He was painfully shy. His parents fought constantly. But nobody saw what he was becoming. This is Inside the Morbid Mind of Cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer, a multi-episode deep dive into the psychology, horror, and legacy of the man who murdered and dismembered 17 young men between 1978 and 1991. What made him this way? What could have stopped him? And how did he hide in plain sight for over a decade? In Episode 1, we go back to the beginning. The early warning signs. The fascination with bones. The boy who never fit in and didn't want to. A strange childhood. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. By all outward appearances, his childhood was typical. His father, Lionel, was a chemist. His mother, Joyce, struggled with depression and anxiety. They moved to Bath, Ohio, when Jeff was 8. But something was already off. He was unusually quiet, a childhood neighbor recalled. Polite, yes, but distant. It was like he was always observing, but never connecting. By age 10, Jeffrey was already showing signs of antisocial behavior, not cruelty to humans, but to animals. He began collecting dead animals, roadkill, bones. He dissolved them in acid in his father's shed, curious about how the body broke down. It was framed as a scientific interest. But what if it wasn't? Isolation and the birth of fantasy. Middle school turned Dahmer inward. He drank heavily, even during class. He performed bizarre pranks to fit in, mimicking epileptic seizures and making strange noises. His classmates laughed. They even had a name for it, doing a Dahmer. But inside, Jeff was spiraling. He began fantasizing, not about power, not about domination, but about control. Total, lifeless, silent control. He told later investigators that his first sexual fantasies were about male bodies, still, helpless, unable to leave. His fantasy merged sex with death, and that collision would define the rest of his life. The first murder, June 18, 1978. Jeff is 18. His parents are divorcing. He's alone in the house for the weekend. No supervision, no rules, no boundaries. That's when he picks up 18-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks. They talk, drink, smoke, and then Hicks wants to leave, but Jeff doesn't want to be alone again. So he bludgeons him with a dumbbell, then strangles him, then dismembers him. He buries some of the remains in the woods behind the house. The rest, he dissolves in acid and flushes. Nobody suspects a thing. It would be 9 years before he kills again. Episode 2. The Factory of Death. By 1987, Jeffrey Dahmer is living in Milwaukee again. He's quiet, works at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, keeps to himself, but inside apartment 213, he's creating a world where nobody can leave him. And if they try, he kills them. The escalation begins. In 1987, Dahmer murders 25-year-old Stephen Twomey in a hotel room. He claims he woke up and the man was dead, but soon, murder becomes routine. From 1988 to 1991, the bodies pile up. James Dockstader, 14. Richard Guerrero, 25. Anthony Sears, 24. He lures them home with money, alcohol, or promises of photos. He drugs them, murders them, dismembers them, and then he escalates again. He begins keeping trophies, skulls, genitals, even entire skeletons. He takes Polaroids of their bodies in various stages of death. He's not just killing, he's creating a museum. The smell of death. Neighbors start to complain. The smell from Dahmer's apartment is unbearable. Something between rotting meat and chemicals. People report it to the landlord. He makes excuses. Spoiled food, dead fish, a broken fridge. The truth? Dahmer has body parts in his refrigerator, freezer, and closet. He's cooking human meat, storing skulls, bleaching bones. He wants his victims to be part of him forever. A missed opportunity. In May 1991, Dahmer lures 14-year-old Konorak Syntha to his apartment. He drugs him and drills a hole in his skull, pouring in acid. An attempt to create a zombie sex slave. Konorak escapes, naked, bleeding, barely conscious. 3 women call 911. But when police arrive, Dahmer convinces them the boy is his 19-year-old lover. They laugh it off, return Konorak to Dahmer. Less than an hour later, he's dead. That one decision may have cost 5 more lives. Episode 3. Caught confessing consuming. July 22nd, 1991. Dahmer invites 32-year-old Tracy Edwards back to his apartment. But this time, something goes wrong. The escape. Edwards notices the smell, the locks on the door, the 55-gallon drum in the corner. He sees a knife, Polaroids of bodies, a bloodstained mattress. He fights Dahmer off and escapes, runs down the street in handcuffs, finds police. They return to the apartment and walk into a real-life horror film. 7 skulls, 2 human hearts, hands in a freezer, a full human head in the fridge, and hundreds of photos of dismembered bodies. Dahmer calmly says, "For what I did, I should be dead." The confession. Over the next several weeks, Dahmer confesses to everything. Calmly, clearly, in horrifying detail. He describes his methods, his fantasies, his motives. He never once pleads insanity. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't stop. The press explodes. Headlines call him the Milwaukee Cannibal. He's charged with 17 counts of murder. In court, he's stoic, silent, empty-eyed. When asked if he feels remorse, he replies, "I should have stayed with God. I didn't. That's why it happened." The victims remembered. Each trial day, families of the victims testify. Their grief fills the room. Some scream, some cry. Dahmer never flinches. In 1992, he's sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, over 900 years in prison. But he won't live long enough to serve them. Episode 4. Death Behind Bars. Even monsters meet their end. And for Jeffrey Dahmer, it came not by the system, but by another inmate. Prison life. At Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Dahmer claims to be born again. He's baptized, reads the Bible, writes letters to victims' families, but other inmates despise him. He jokes about his crimes, uses ketchup to mimic blood. He's not repenting. He's mocking. Corrections officers grow concerned but don't act. November 28, 1994. While cleaning the prison gym bathrooms, Dahmer is left unsupervised with 2 other inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. Scarver, a deeply religious man, says God told him what to do. He bludgeons Dahmer with a metal bar. Then Anderson. Both die within hours. Dahmer's death is as brutal as his life. Scarver later says, he crossed the line with some people, prison justice. Episode 5. Inside the Morbid Mind. So what made Jeffrey Dahmer who he was? And what do experts say about his mind? No simple answers. Psychologists who interviewed Dahmer describe him as highly intelligent, emotionally detached, a lacking empathy, not psychotic, but dangerously obsessive. He didn't kill out of rage, or hate, or pleasure. He killed to possess, to make people stay. His victims were often young, vulnerable, and marginalized. Men of color, runaways, immigrants. He targeted the invisible. Red flags missed. So many moments could have stopped him. The hitchhiker in 1978. The neighbor complaints. The 14-year-old returned to his killer. But police and society ignored the warnings. Ignored the victims. Dahmer was white, polite, soft-spoken, and that allowed 17 murders to go unnoticed. The legacy Dahmer left behind. A devastated city, 17 grieving families, a system forced to reckon with how it failed. His case inspired documentaries, shows, and countless theories. But beyond the media, there are still unanswered questions. Could he have been stopped as a teen? Was he made or born a killer? How many others like him are hiding behind normal? Final thoughts. This has been Inside the Morbid Mind of Cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer. A story of obsession, of grief, of how darkness can live in plain sight. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and always trust your instincts.